surviving in the corporate growth and politics and every other things. So one day I decided that okay, it's not working, and then probably I should look other ways to increase my money, increase my net worth and all. And at that time, I started reading books on personal finance and investment. So over a period of 2-3 years, I read multiple books from multiple authors and professors, and I had a good understanding on the subject. And I implemented those strategies in my personal life, and I, along with my wife, followed those strategies continuously, religiously, and it helped us actually. So we were not following any like very exotic or very high profile strategy to keep our personal finance in check. We were following certain simple basic rules which helped us really. So one fine day, I thought, why not? I had this dream of becoming an author, and I have this content which has really worked for us. So why not? We can start. I can start writing. So coming from finance background, I did my MBA in finance from IIM Kozhikode, and working as a corporate banker and understanding these things from close quarters, I felt I had an edge over others, and I started writing. So people initially told that probably you should write blogs or you should write articles, but I thought that will take too much of time, and I jumped directly into writing my book. Before that, I had not written any single essay or anything other than the our answers in the exam sheets. So so after that I wrote, and thankfully with the God grace, the book clicked. The Richest Engineer did work more than what I was expecting. And then slowly and steadily, I started exploring other aspects of the personal finance. So like my first book, The Richest Engineer, it was more of like motivational and self-help kind of book, which led people to realize the importance of money and some basic fundamentals. Then working as a banker, I realized that not all the financial intermediaries who are there in the industry are working for the end investors and consumers. There are certain legal but unethical practices being followed by all these things, and which I thought it should be made aware, and people should know these legal but unethical malpractices, and they should understand what is in their best interest. So from that point of view, I wrote my second book, Master Your Money, Master Your Life, which talks about the inner working of all the financial institutions, right from banks to credit cards to financial advisor to insurance companies to mutual funds to stockbrokers, everything. So this was one go-to practical book on personal finance. And then after that book got published, I enrolled myself for my Master of Financial Engineering in UCLA, where I learned many rules and techniques of stock market investing. And thus came my third book, Index Investing, which talks mainly about how to invest in stock market and what are the factors affecting risk and return. So yeah, so that was more of my journey and writing my books.
Any suggestions for budding writers? Where we should begin?
Yeah, so for anyone who needs to write, who wants to write, the first basic criteria is that you need an urge to express yourself. If there is no urge to express yourself, then you may find it difficult to write continuously. So I had this urge. I wanted to let the world know that these are certain information you should be aware of, so that you can do better with your finances. So that is the first thing. And second thing is that, yeah, you need to write continuously daily, and you need to read a lot, because without reading, yeah, it becomes very difficult for people to get the momentum to write. So yeah, those are the key points I feel people should be aware of.
Okay. So now let's get down to the main topic that I guess most of us are waiting for. And I'll be talking like an investor or general public and whatever thought process they have. And I'll be representing the questions that we have received from them. And
Yeah.
I'll be posting it to you. So let's begin as a normal person. So first thing that comes to my mind is like, okay, there's something called stock market where people earn money, lots of money. So but there is certain trick to it. I must have knowledge about it and so things. So what I feel is like, maybe I should go and study. I can follow stock market, I can listen to people and a lot, and it's all about cherry picking the stocks, picking the best stock in the market, and then investing it, practicing it, and then I'll be able to, with experience, gain so much knowledge that I'll be also getting that money that people talk about, earning 100% interest and all. So what is your suggestion about that? So can I like go ahead and follow this?
Yeah, so actually this is what I did when I started investing in stock market. So when I thought of like, yeah, this is one area which can give me more than interest rate, which is much more above the inflation rate, and I can really grow my money in real terms, not only nominal terms. So I started reading stocks. Actually, I was working as a corporate banker and we were analyzing companies. So I had that advantage of analyzing companies, looking into the financial statements and ratios and other business parameters. So I thought that, yeah, I have an edge, probably I can invest in stocks directly. I can cherry pick stocks, but I did for that for some time and I fell flat on my face. So I realized, okay, I am an MBA from IIM Kozhikode. I'm working as a corporate banker, and I know like how to analyze companies. That was my main profession of analyzing companies, preparing financial reports and all. So I knew that I know this, but still I'm not able to do. Then I understood, like, then I felt, what if that is the case with me, what would be about the average investors? So to answer that question, actually people should know two key fundamentals of the stock market. First, stock market is the most competitive game ever played in the world. Why I'm saying is because it attracts best of the brains from all across the world. And who are these brains? They are the institutional investors. They have the names like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citibank, Barclays. We have ICICI Pru, and then we have Kotak Mahindra, Axis. So all these are big players, and they have been in the industry for over 5 decades, or many of them for over a century. They have an experience of across multiple geographies, and when they are playing this game, so if there was any idea of picking undervalued stocks, the basic premise of security analysis is that you pick undervalued stocks, the stocks which are undervalued. Now if there was any undervalued stocks available in the market, it will not come in the notice of individual investors like you and me. All these big players who have sophisticated computers, who have research analysts, who have PhDs, quants, and MBS guys working for them continuously, it will come into their hand, and they will, with crores of rupees at their disposal, they will take away all those undervalued securities within a second. So this is one first fundamental of the stock market. And second fundamental is that stock market is highly efficient. So what does it mean? That any information, any mispricing that is present in the market, it will get swept away immediately. If not like within a fraction of a second, like within 10 minutes or within 20 minutes, it will get swept away. So if you feel that you got certain information about a company which will give you an edge over others, then that information has that material which can give you extra return, but that will come first to the institutional investors before it goes to you. So that's why it becomes very difficult for individuals to cherry pick stocks. And another point that I would like to mention, like, most people confuse between a good company and a good stock. Now there's a difference between a good company and a good stock. Suppose everybody knows that Kotak Mahindra Bank is a good company versus a Karnataka Bank. So, but is Kotak Mahindra Bank is a good stock versus Karnataka Bank? That is very difficult question to answer. Why? Because Kotak Mahindra stock price is very high, and when you purchase a stock, you are basically looking for the earning per share. So the PE ratio of Kotak Mahindra Bank is very high as compared to the Karnataka Bank. So it becomes very difficult for people who are buying Kotak Mahindra Bank share price, thinking that it's a very good company, will earn a higher return. It is primarily because the price of the Kotak Mahindra is so high that its future return will decrease. So that is one thing which most people don't understand. When they're analyzing cherry picking stocks, they are always looking out for good companies. They're not looking out for good stocks. So it becomes very difficult for them to cherry pick stocks consistently, which can give them good return.
Okay, so I get your point. I mean, basically, you're saying ki considering the manpower and the money and capital, whatever these Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs have, and the brains that they have, it would be very difficult for me to be as a single person fight against all those. So I
True.
get your point. But okay, so let me think in other ways. So maybe I can just follow these individuals, these maybe business news channels, business magazines, and the so-called market experts, since they are doing all the analyzing. And when they tell us on the TV, on the magazine, or maybe in the newspaper, we can simply follow those steps and expect that, okay, by following those steps, we should be able to make a good return.
Yeah, so that is another one of the human biases that has been discussed in academic literature very thoroughly, that people confuse information with knowledge and an edge. So people think that the more information they have, the more like knowledgeable they become. But what they don't understand is that information is knowledge only as long as it's private to you. That means like if you only you know that information, if you have, then only you have an edge over others. But if that information is known to the entire world, then that information is as worthless as anything can be. So suppose like say RBI decreases the interest rate, and then we have a host of panel discussion on news channel that people are discussing how this reduction in the RBI interest rate will impact the corporate sector, and why it might what would be the effect on the stock market. So you hear this news from the business news channel, and in the next newspaper, morning newspaper, you read all those points and all. So you think, okay, the RBI has reduced the interest rate, so probably like corporates will earn more, and then there will be a surge in the stock market. But what they don't realize is this information has already been factored into the stock market. So when RBI came up with this policy in changing the interest rate, so all the market participants knew it immediately before it goes to you. Actually, individual investors are right at the bottom of the information chain. So what the information they get, any juice that has to be extracted from that information, it has been already extracted by the corporates, policymakers, institutional investors, stockbrokers, and then it comes to the individual investors. So individual investors think, okay, I read this economic times, these are the key policies which will affect, or I read this sector research report, so these particular sectors is going to do good. But what they don't realize that they are right at the bottom of the information chain, and any impact on those news that has to be factored into the stock market, it has already been factored. Also, so what we see like in the news channel and the business magazines, who are the people coming there and predicting the movement of the stock market? They are basically the stockbrokers. They come from the brokerage firms, and the basic premise of stockbroker and brokerage firm is that they encourage people to trade, because their primary source of income is the commission they earn from every trading activity. So they will come with an view that they can predict the stock market, which all stocks will. So you will see like people will come that you should hold these stocks, you should buy these stocks, or you should sell these stocks. So basically they are encouraging people to trade more, and the more the people trade, the more they lose. So this has been like academically proven, and there has been many academic researches done on why trading is hazardous to individual wealth. So all these business news channel or the so-called experts, they have an inner agenda of making people trade, and that is why I advise people not to follow these people, because they are not there to give you certain knowledge or wisdom or teach you the essentials of stock market. They are there to make you trade, and that is one thing which should be avoided by individual investors.
Okay, so now I understand why my friends or colleagues, which I've seen in offices, like they normally get calls from their stockbrokers or whatever of institutions. Okay, sir, this stock is going hot. Let us sell this one and instead buy that one. So now I get your point. Why they continuously, ask us to change our portfolio, take out money from this one and put it into other ones. So I get your point.
Yeah. So basically, what they do is that the stock they ask you to buy, they will ask somebody else to sell, because they don't hold so many stocks with themselves. So the recommendations that they give it to you, the opposite recommendation they give it to other party also. And in this way, they induce the two parties to trade. And when the two parties trade, so they earn their commission in between. And now the question comes like when these so-called experts come and try to predict the market, is there any validity in their prediction? Like, do their predictions come ever true? So there was this academic research done by Philip Tetlock. He's one of the senior professor at University of Pennsylvania. So he conducted a research over 20 years, and he analyzed all the predictions by these market experts and the other people who come on television and does the prediction. where does their prediction lie? Like, is there any validity? Like, do they become ever true? So in his research, he found that most of the people went wrong more than 50% time. That is, if you toss a coin and if you guess, you would be more right than what these people are claiming to be right. So, and another thing that I will tell you, like, if I were to be right in my prediction only 51% of the time, I would be a billionaire in the stock market, from the stock market. If I have an accuracy of 51% and I go wrong 49%, I'll become a billionaire. And if that is not the case, then there's no point following the predictions of these market experts, the so-called market experts. So yeah, academic research has proven that there is no validity in these predictions, and people should avoid following these so-called market experts to base their investment decision.
Okay, so basically, I get your point that it would be difficult for me to go invest as an individual. It would be also useless to follow whatever news is coming on newspaper or news channels or even online communities and all, because the information is already stale. So
Yeah.
now coming to those professional money managers and the mutual fund managers. So basically they are getting the first information. They have that powerhouse behind them. They have all the info. They have the first connect and everything. So why not give my own money to them, to the professional money managers, or invest in a mutual fund? So now, because they are getting everything, they are following the news, they are the top, first in the line. So they will eventually, get me also money. Like they will carry my money and they will earn me as well. So shall I follow that route then? I mean, just give my money to these professional managers?
Yeah, that would be the second best step. Like, definitely in individual investors investing on their own, that is the worst thing that they can do. Apart from the trading stocks, both are very hazardous to individuals and investor wealth. So the second best option people have is like investing with the mutual fund. Now, what these mutual funds are like, they are the big players. They have the best of the research teams and all. And but the problem is, as I said earlier, this market is highly competitive, if not entirely efficient. And because of this competitiveness, like everyone is fighting against each other to earn the extra pie from the share market. So it becomes very difficult for them to have an edge over others. So one year you will have Goldman Sachs winning the game. Second year you will have Morgan Stanley. Third year you will have ICICI. Fourth year you will have BlackRock. So one year somebody is winning, but other players are losing. It cannot be like everybody cannot win, because see, if somebody is winning, that somebody is winning means somebody is earning an return over extra over the stock market, then there has to be somebody below who will be earning less than the stock market return. So for every winner, there has to be a corresponding loser. So that is one fundamental mathematical law of stock market. You Everybody cannot be winner. And by winner, you mean like earning more than the stock market return. So when people are investing in the with the mutual fund, like these are the typical active mutual funds who try to cherry pick stocks from the universe of 500 or 1000 stocks and create a portfolio of 40-50 stocks. So they are charging you fees, and because of these fees, the net return earned by the investors reduces considerably. So on an overall basis, the mutual fund companies earn a return over the stock market, but that is the gross return. But what actually comes to the individual investor is the net return, and the net return earned by the individual investors is less than what these people claim to be. Second point is that these mutual fund companies are charging you fees even when they are winning, and they are charging you fees even when they are losing. So in many instances, like when they are underperforming the stock market, then also they are charging you fees. So suppose like stock market return, average return has been 15%, and there is a mutual fund which delivered a below par return of 14%, and now they will charge you another 2.5 to 3%. So the net return that came to you was 11%. But if you had followed a simple strategy of investing in the stock market through an index fund, you would have earned a return of 15%. No brain supplied, nothing. But when you're investing in active mutual fund, basically you are incurring a cost which decreases your net return considerably. So this is one thing which
Abhishek,
Abhishek, you're on mute.
Unmute, please.
We cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, fine now.
Yeah. So second thing is that there are many constraints that in these mutual fund companies face, both structural as well as behavioral, in performing their duty. So because of these challenges, they are actually unable to deliver what they promised to deliver. And that is what thing which people should understand, that yeah, what they claim in the their prospectus or in their advertisement, that they can help individual investors earn stock market return which is over and over the stock market. That is not always true. So that is one thing. Yeah.
So basically, what I see is this is like investing in a in basically in a race. I'm investing on a horse. I'm betting on a horse. So
Yeah.
why not choose the best horse? So there must be some metrics. Like I can see that there are ratings which are assigned to these fund institutions or fund managers. I can also see there. I can also look at their AUMs. They are managing large funds. That means most people have trust on them and all. So can I not use those factors and figure out who would be the winning horse, so that at least they can perform mostly above the market average which you are talking about? So
Yeah.
what is your point on that?
So yeah, so there was one this like it has been known publicly, like everybody knows that if you have a limited option, the chance of you picking that is much higher than when you have unlimited option. So what happens when people go to invest in mutual funds, they see like scores of mutual funds, like every fund houses have more than 200, 300 funds. And many of them like have different classes like growth, dividend and hybrid and equity, debt, so many multiple mutual funds they will have. Now investor get confused. They are unable to decide which mutual fund they should invest with. So that becomes so now what few people like some of these business magazines and internet portals have come up with some of the criteria like star. They give credit rating to the mutual funds, or they give like they declare their asset under management and all those stuff. So when investors look at the star rating, what basically they are seeing is the funds which have performed well in the past, and star rating doesn't tell any information about how the fund will do in the future. Why? It is because there's no correlation that has been found which can help in predicting the performance of the fund based on its past performance. So if people are investing in stocks based on the star rating, basically they are driving their car looking at the rear view mirror, which is not an advisable thing to do. Second thing is that there's something called survivorship bias. So this survivorship bias is basically based on the fact that mutual fund companies are killing their bad performing funds, or they're merging those funds with the fund which are performing good. So what you see in the history is only those funds which have survived, not the funds which went out of the business. So there is a clear bias in this way of looking at things. Third thing is that there is a lack of persistence in the maintaining those star rating. So academic research has shown that the mutual funds which have received 4 or 5 star rating, they cannot maintain their status beyond 2-3 years. So when you invest in a mutual fund thinking that, oh, it has earned, it has done good in the past, it has a 5 star rating, I should invest with them, then there is a very high probability will that it will go, its star rating will go below 3 or 2, primarily because they have done better in the past, mainly because of the luck or some other factor, and that luck cannot be persistence going forward. So there's lack of persistence in the mutual fund, and this makes it all very difficult for people to choose mutual fund based on the star rating. Now coming to the asset under management. So basically asset under management is how much money these mutual funds have in their portfolio right now. So people generally think that if a mutual fund company have a higher asset under management, then probably like investors are showing their confidence in their ability to perform, and it is a true indicator of their skills. So we should invest with them. But what individual investors don't understand, that when a fund size increases, it becomes very difficult for them to deploy additional cash. Why? It is mainly because we have limited number of good stocks in the market. So if I'm having a 500 crore in my asset under management, I can find good number of companies in which I can invest. But if I have like 5,000 crore, so where those extra 4,500 crore I should invest. So there are not many good companies available in the market. So what these fund companies do, they will invest in those companies which they did not like earlier, or they will keep portion of the money in cash or in some other form, and which decreases the return considerably. So there has been many academic researches done by the professors, and they found that with increase the asset under management, the return decreases. So this is something counterintuitive, but yeah, in the stock market, not everything is what we tend to believe. So this is one of the things that people should understand, that yeah, a higher AUM is not always an indication of that better performance going forward.
Okay. Okay. So I think this should come as a surprise to many people. Like, okay, I mean, why AUM, and also you have explained it beautifully, and this should actually help many people. And there were a few questions related to this when we submitted the form. So I think that they should have got an answer by this. Okay, I would like to ask one more thing. So you have mentioned like they are charging you fees, and you have mentioned it many times. It reduces our return by 2% and something. But when I noticed, like most of the mutual funds say that they have their expense ratio is around 1%. So what is your say on that? I mean, why you always normally take it as 2% or something? So
yeah, so basically what I've realized is that these days mutual fund companies are less of an investment company and more of a marketing firm. So they market a lot, and they also market misinformation like to a large extent. So what they say is true, but they did not provide complete picture. So expense ratio is the fees they charge from the investors, but there are other parties involved in the stock market which they do not disclose in their prospectus. So when they say expense ratio is 1% of the AUM, so yeah, it is true that they are charging 1% from the investors. But what about other market makers, like their market makers, then their stockbrokers? So who are giving them their fees and commission? It comes from the end investors. So, and then there are additional costs like market impact cost. So people should understand this market impact cost is very high. It goes from 5.5 to 1%. And this happens with big players. So suppose I have like 1000 crore at my disposal and I want to purchase shares of Infosys. Now Infosys shares, suppose right now is 500. I'm not very sure what is the current stock price of Infosys. Suppose the Infosys stock price is 500 and a particular mutual fund company wants to deploy 1000 crore in Infosys. So the moment they start purchasing those stocks, the stock prices will it will increase, because the more the money is flowing into purchasing the stocks, the stock prices of the Infosys will keep on increasing from 500 to 510 to 520 to 550. So the moment this entire 1000 crore gets deployed in purchasing the stocks, the price at which those stocks have been purchased by the mutual fund companies is very high. It is not 500. It would be something in the range of 540 or 550. So this increase in the cost of purchasing the Infosys stock price decreases the future return of the end investors. So this is called market impact cost. But if any individual investor, suppose I wanted to invest, suppose 1 lakh rupees in Infosys stock price, it will not change a single rupee in the stock price of the Infosys. It will always be 500, because 1 lakh rupee in Infosys doesn't impact anything. But if you invest 1000 crore in Infosys, the stock price will change. So these are some of the things like which, and there are additional bid-ask spread, and then stockbroker commissions, and then cash drags. These all, there are multiple costs in addition to the expense ratio, which I have discussed in my book Index Investing. So all these costs add up to like something close to 2.5 to 3% to the end investors. And another thing I would like to mention here, like as I said earlier, like mutual fund companies are very good at misrepresenting numbers. So when they are telling that I charge 1%, it sounds like they're charging very less fees. Now, if you do the real math is that the total cost incurred by the investors is 3%. Now, suppose the mutual fund company give you a return of 15%. So if you invested 100 rupees, you get 15 rupees as a gross return. Now from this 15 rupees, you're paying them 3 rupees. So what comes to you is 12 rupees. So basically you are giving 3 rupees out of the 15 rupees to the mutual fund companies. And that is something as big as 20%. In many cases, it is more than 20 to 25%. Now imagine a mutual fund company coming and telling, okay, invest with us, we charge 20% of your net income. How many of the investors will like to go ahead with them? I guess not many, because 20% of your net income sounds very big, and it is the real picture. Mutual fund companies are charging more than 20 to 25% of your net income. But what they say, they say I charge you 1% of the AUM. So this is a very misleading and unethical practice of representing the fees, which people should understand that, yeah, this is not the true picture. The true picture is that of the 15 rupees that I earn, I pay them 3 rupees. So that is like 20% of my net income that I'm giving. And if you talk about like nominal versus real terms, so the why we are investing in the stock market, it is because we want to earn a return which is over and above the inflation rate. So inflation rate has been in India has been around 5 to 6%. Now suppose you earn a 15% gross return in nominal terms. In real terms, it comes to 9%. And out of this 9%, you are giving 3% to the mutual fund company. So in real terms, which is the actual, nominal is something that is like nominal, which doesn't come to you. Real is the something which comes to you. So out of this 9 rupees, you are paying 3 rupees to the mutual fund company. So you are paying more than 33-35% of your net income in real terms to the mutual fund companies. And that is the reason so many mutual companies are entering the market, and so many of them are trying to lure as many investors in their portfolio as possible, because it is a very high profit business for anybody to enter. But most of the people are not aware of such things, and that's why they fall trapped to these mutual fund companies.
This must have been eye opener for I mean most of the people here, because when we normally calculate, okay, it's only just 1%. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, if I can just give my 1% and they are managing my money and they are getting me such high returns, why not give them? But if yeah, what you said is like, if they ask me ki, okay, give me 20% and then I'll work out, and in real terms give me 33% of the money that we'll make, and then we'll manage a fund, then I believe very rarely people will take a call to go and invest with the mutual fund people.
Yeah, true.
So I guess we should be reading more and more books and doing research. I mean, instead of just, I think Madhup sir wants to say something.
Yeah, so this is very interesting so far, but I think everybody wants to know that what should they do really with their money? Where I mean, these are really turbulent times. These are volatile markets, and nothing seems to be stable. Nothing seems to be promising. So what should one do with their money?
Yeah, so given that these are turbulent times, and like people are like they're impending economic recession scenario where people may lose job, or like there may be certain uncertainties going forward. So the first thing, if you want to invest in stock market, it has to be a long-term investment horizon. Like you cannot invest in stock market and think that your money will grow in 2-3 years or 5 years, because like there's a lot of volatility in the market, and that is the prime that is the main characteristic of the stock market. So before you plan to invest, you should have some cash balance. You should have some emergency fund reserved for next 6 months or 1 year, so that in case there is something untoward happen, then you are able to survive in this time of crisis. Second thing is that before you invest, there has to be some asset allocation. Basically, you cannot invest all your investment pool into equity. There has to be some portion invested in bond of fixed deposit, or then some portion in equity. Now coming to equity, it is said that you should diversify your portfolio as much as possible. And if you're investing in active mutual fund, basically the Indian stock market has a collection of 5,000 stocks. So you're choosing only 40 stocks or 50 stocks, and they're charging a fees which decreases return. So to diversify your portfolio, you should invest in a broad market index fund. So index fund basically tracks major indices of the stock market, and they invest those monies in that particular indices. So suppose you are investing in BSE 100 or Nifty 50 or S&P 500. So you can put those monies in those market and forget it and leave it for at least 10 years. This is my recommendation. Why I'm saying so? Because if you study the return of the stock market, the longer you hold your investment, the risk comes considerably down. For 1 year, the volatility is something very high, which comes down to which decreases in value when it investment horizon goes to 5 years, and it comes down to as little as 2 to 3% if your investment horizon is 15 years. So before investing in the equity market, these are my key suggestions that people should be aware of. That have an emergency fund in your with you, that if something untoward happen, you you are able to sustain in this time of crisis. Second, you should allocate your asset money into different asset classes. Like you can invest in a bond, or you can have some money in fixed deposit. And when you're investing in the equity market, I would suggest to go with the index fund, because they invest in across sectors, across companies. Basically, they invest in top 100 or top 200 companies, which comprises company from across sectors and across classes. Like they will have large cap, they will have mid cap, and some indices have small cap as well. So they will diversify your holding across classes and across sectors, and it will increase your risk over considerably over your investment horizon. So this would be my key suggestion.
Okay, so considering this turbulent time, so shall I wait for to hit the bottom? When we normally talk about timing the market, the curve. So when it bottoms out, that is the when it gives me the biggest return. So shall I be putting money right now? Shall I be putting it in chunks, or like you said, it is clear. Like you would be suggest basically go and invest in index fund instead of trying to figure out the stock that will give you the biggest return and all. So I get that point, but shall I wait right now, or shall I invest in big chunks or in small portions? What is your suggestion? I mean, can I time it right, or how it should be?
Yeah, so like there's one special characteristic of the stock market, and that it is unpredictable in the near future. So for any short-term period of like say 3 months, 1 year, or 2 year, it becomes unpredictable. So if an investor who is thinking that he can wait and he can try the market and see where it bottoms out, it cannot be done. Like even the institutional investors are unable to find where the tops and bottoms of the market would be. So if you're waiting for it, you don't know how the market will perform. Like what would be its future course in near future. But over a longer horizon, say 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it becomes very easily predictable as the stock market return converges to a fundamental return. So basically, there are two returns associated with the stock market. One is fundamental return, one is speculative return. So fundamental return is associated with the company's earnings, company's business model, company's products, everything. And this does not change so much on a daily basis as we see the return or the stock price is changing. That change is coming from the speculative factor, and this speculative factor is basically on the sentiment of the investors. So you do not know, like basically, I do not know what would be the sentiment of my wife next day. So it becomes and so when there are millions of investors, you do not know how their sentiments will change, over next few days or so. It becomes very difficult to predict. So my suggestion would be that you should not wait for the market bottom out, because if there was a easy way to identify, like everybody would be doing that, and since and it becomes all the become worthless. So you should invest regularly, and SIP is one thing that I usually recommend, that be systematic in your investment plans. Invest every month. Do not think like how the market will go up or how the market will go down, because over a longer horizon, market will always go up. It cannot be that market will keep on going down, because if that will happen, then even in your investment in real estate or fixed deposit will not be as worthy as you would like them to be, because since if the market is going down, everything goes down with it. So like history has confirmed, and as long as we humans we as a humans are productive in our effort, the market will go up. Market is nothing but the sum total of our economic effort. So the more we as an individual like worker and producer, the more we put effort in economic activities, the market is going to rebound back. And that is one thing which people should understand, that market is not always going to keep on going down, or it will not always keep on going up also. So overall, there is a normal growth pattern in the stock market, but there is a lot of volatility intermittently. So people should avoid of those volatilities, and they should keep on investing regularly every month, or like whenever they have extra cash to invest.
Okay, so basically there is, I mean, we shouldn't get into all these talks of like the market is bottomed out. I think tomorrow it should go up, or now is the right time to go in. I mean, we shouldn't basically wait for it to bottom or something. We should just keep on investing even when it is going down. So your suggestion
Yeah.
is that even I see the market is falling I should be making those investments?
Yeah, so actually the market declining is one of the golden opportunities for people to invest more, because the rule of the mathematics say I will earn more the less I pay for something. So suppose I'm purchasing a cow for its milk, the less I pay for the cow, the more milk I'll get for every rupee I invested in the cow. So when you are investing in the stocks, basically you are looking for its earning and dividend. And if the stock price has gone down, it is a good, it is selling at discount, you should buy those. But people have this tendency that they extrapolate the recent performance. So when they see market going down, they start panicking. And why they see panicking? Because they look at their portfolio and they see, oh, I invested 10 lakh, now it is 5 lakh. I have done so bad. So, but what they don't understand, there is a law of mean reversion. So law of mean reversion basically tells that stock market returns converges to its mean return over a long period. So if the market has gone down, the law of mean reversion will make this stock market return to go up at a higher rate in the near future. So right now the market has come down from 40,000 in early February to now, right now 30 or 31,000. So it is a golden opportunity for people to grab this and invest more. But yeah, people like for every any other individual investor, my suggestion would be to be systematic and invest, keep on investing, whether the market is going up or whether the market going down. You should not worry about the volatility in the near future and keep on investing every month. That should be the advice I would give to individual investors.
I would like to post a question that we have received in the chat. So Sunil Khanna sir is asking ki, what is your suggestion for people above 60 years? I mean, is bank FD the only option, or should they be also be considering about government bonds or anything else?
For people over 60 years, actually, it becomes a bit tricky to invest in the equity market, because it depends when you want to pull out money from the market for your own use. And if that is not the case, and if you want to pass your money to your next generation, to your son, to your grandson, then investing in the equity market is the best thing. Because what happens, like when you bequeath your this wealth and asset to your next generation, so there is a tax advantage which gets passed on to like your son, daughter, or grandchildren, which people should take advantage of. So basically, it tells that when you bequeath your asset or your farm or your estate, so the cost gets reduced to its original value, and then your generation in their books will record those investment at the cost at you purchased at your time. So they need to pay lesser tax going forward. So that is one thing which people can take advantage. But yeah, if you want for personal consumption, if you want to take out money from the market in near future, say for medical treatment or say for like going on a trip or vacation, then investing in the equity market may not be a good proposition, because in the near future it becomes very uncertain and very difficult to predict what would be the return from the investment in the market. So going for like FD or some debt mutual fund or some government bonds would be advisable for people above 60 years of age.
So people have questioned how do you go ahead and do SIP in index funds? So can we do it through any stockbroker like ICICI Securities or Zerodha or something, or is there any special way that we should follow?
Yeah, so this is one topic actually which is very prevalent in the present times. Actually, when you want to invest in mutual fund, whether active mutual fund or index fund, so there are two approaches of investing. One is called direct, one is called regular. Now, what is this regular? Actually, most of the people do goes investing through regular approach, which is not advisable. Basically, when you go through a regular approach, you give your money to a stockbroker, say ICICI Securities or Zerodha or Sharekhan, and these stockbrokers will invest your money to the asset management company. They may be like Goldman, they may be like Kotak Asset or ICICI Pru or any other asset management company. So they charge you fees from them. And now when these asset management company invest in the market, they will route this money to the stockbroker again, because only stockbrokers are the authorized person who can do such transaction in the market stock exchange. So in this case, stockbroker is making money from you twice. First, they charge commission from you for giving your money to the asset management company, and then asset management company in turn give to the stockbroker to invest in the market. So that is not advisable approach to do it. So seeing these, actually SEBI saw that there is a conflict of interest and the people are losing a lot of money unnecessarily paying intermediaries. So SEBI asked the AMC to open a direct channel. So now if you go to any AMC, go to UTI mutual fund or go to ICICI mutual fund, so you will see that you can invest in them directly. So this is called direct route. So if you want to invest in the index fund, which I suggest to people, so you go to any AMC website, and then in the corner of their, somewhere in the corner, not in the front, because they don't make money from the index fund, but because SEBI has mandated, and so they need to comply with these rules. In some corner of their dashboard, internet dashboard, you will see there is something called index fund or ETF. Go there, and when you click that link, index fund or ETF in their website, you will see like there'll be option like Nifty, Sensex, or BSE 100 or S&P 500, something like that. So you click on that, and then you can invest directly to the asset management company, and you can transfer your money directly from saving account to those AMCs. So this is one very easy and cost-effective approach of investing.
Okay. So can you also mention a small point like what would be the cost of index funds here? I mean, what is the actual?
I think Madhup sir wants to ask some question.
Yeah,
okay.
this is
Sorry, sir.
this is related to your newest book, Index Investing.
Yes, sir.
So you think that index trading is a good option, or index investing is a good option? And second part of the question is that is it better to invest in the broader indices or sectoral indices?
Yeah, so there are two basic ideas with an index fund. First is that it diversifies your portfolio to a large extent, and second is that it makes you buy and hold. Basically, with index fund, you don't get to trade your investment portfolio. Like for an active mutual fund, basically you want to invest in, suppose 1 lakh rupees in a particular mutual fund, and if you see its performance not doing good, you take out money and invest in some other. But with index fund, that is not possible. You invest for like 5 years, 10 years, 7 years. There's an investment horizon, and you keep and hold those investments for longer term. And because of which the return that the end investor earn is very high, because as you don't incur trading cost, you don't incur portfolio churn. So, so now coming to that, whether you should invest in the sectoral based indices or overall market indices. So when you are deciding to invest in the sectoral based indices, so you are taking a bet on that particular sector. So sector is a sub part of the overall market. Suppose I want to invest in say banking sector, or suppose I want to invest in say textile sector. So that sector is just a small part of the overall market. So basically you are not diversifying, you are taking a bet, you are taking a chance that this sector will do good. So, and by taking a chance, you can win or you can lose. So there's a high risk and there's high gain probability. But investment, what I feel, is not about gambling or making good money and also with a high probability of losing your money. Investment is all about earning return which is over and above the inflation rate over a period of time. So investing in a broad market indices like BSE 100 or BSE 200 or Nifty 50, which comprises of companies from all sectors, would be a prudent approach of investing. This is what I feel.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'm just looking at the questions. So Shyam is asking, if we identify a good stock to buy, then what is the process that we should use to judge the price, and what is the right price for a stock basically? I mean, whether it is high price, whether it is a low price, and
so that was one first. Like when people are analyzing stocks, they analyze good companies. Actually, in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, the Princeton University Nobel Prize winning author Daniel Kahneman says that when people are faced with a tough question, they substitute it with an easy question. So the tough question is which is a good company to, which is a good stock to buy, but it becomes very difficult for people to know which is a good stock. So they substitute it with a which is a good company to buy. So people do that. Like I know, like HDFC Bank is a good company, Infosys is a good company, or TCS is a good company. But are they good stocks? I don't know. Why? Because the price may be so high, then the future return may not be commensurate with the risk that I'm taking. So it is like very difficult for anybody to know like is the stock price is rightly priced, because the entire Dalal Street and entire the security analyst and fund manager job is to find is there any mispricing in the stock, and if they are not able to do it consistently, you cannot imagine a normal individual investor to find such an undervalued stock. So yeah, I cannot tell, like there is a concept called intrinsic value theory. So intrinsic value is the basic the fundamental value that the company stock should be. And Professor Burton Malkiel in his book, A Random Walk Down the Wall Street, told that he has given a quote that even for a god, it is difficult to determine what is the intrinsic value of the company. No one can decide. So no one can find out what is the true intrinsic value of the company. And people buy stocks based on their judgment, which many times go true, many times go wrong. So there's no scientific approach to find out what is the true intrinsic value of the company.
Okay. So Jiten has a very simple question. He says ki if most of the mutual funds are trying to outperform the index, and you are asking us to invest in the index fund, so why is it better then? Why is it a better choice?
Yeah. So yeah, this is one thing. Like every mutual fund claimed to beat the market. Now, what people don't understand that all the mutual fund companies combined together is the market. So this is one thing which people should know first, that all the mutual fund companies, all the insurance companies, all the iBanks, they comprise the market. They are the market, and everybody is trying to beat the market. So you cannot beat yourself consistently. If there is one player which is beating the market, which is beating the indices, then there has to be another entity which is losing the indices. So sometime somebody will win, sometimes somebody will lose. But over a longer period, like 5-10 years, everybody will converge to the stock market. And since these active mutual funds are charging fees, the net return earned by the investors becomes very less. So that's why I advise index fund, because index fund doesn't promise you to give a market beating return. They tell that, okay, what is the stock market return? I will give it to you, and I will charge very less fees. The fees of the index fund is something called something from 0.2 to 0.5%. So that is the least fees. Basically, that is only the administrative cost incurred with that allocating your money to different companies. Apart from that, they don't charge any marketing fees. They don't charge any advertising fees. Or there are so many multiple fees. There are no trading costs. There are no market impact cost. So because of it, the cost of index fund reduces considerably, and this reduction in cost is passed on to the end investor as their net return. So yeah.
So can you mention ki what is the approximate cost that we pay for index investment? For example, you mentioned for mutual fund it can be from 2 to 3%. So what does that range for index funds?
So for index fund, the range is with something 0.5 to 0.6%. Like some of the mutual fund, some of the index fund in US, like Vanguard and all, they charge as little as 0.15 to 0.2%. In India, like there's some inefficiency in the market, and tracking the indexes incur certain additional cost. So the fees is high, something in the range of 0.5 to 0.6%. But when you compare to the total fees of like mutual funds, active mutual funds, which is in the range of 2.5 to 3%, this 0.5% is the least you can pay. So yeah, this is the range 0.5 to 0.6%. And the law of mathematics tell the less I pay to the intermediary, the more I get from them.
Okay, cool, understood. So I'll be taking just last question from you. I think we are out of time, running out of time. So Amit has asked the question: ki are there multiple types of index funds? I mean, like market index funds, bond index funds, or balanced index funds. Is there any categories of index funds, or is it just the market index that?
So yeah, actually indices is a portfolio of securities. It can be equity index, it can be a bond index, it can be a gold index, it can be commodity index, or it can be sector index also. So index is just like a list of the companies in those particular sector or particular classes. So when we are talking about the equity indices, so equity indices are like we have Sensex, which comprises of top 30 companies of the stock market. We have Nifty, which comprises of the top 50 companies of the market. Then we have BSE 100 or BSE 200. So these are like top 200 companies of the market. And then we have like sector specific indices, like as we discussed earlier, like we have banking sector, then we have chemical sector, we have iron and steel sector. So you can, when you are investing in the banking sector indices, basically you're putting all your money in the top banks and other financial institutions of the country. So that fund will not allocate your money to other companies. They will allocate to those companies belonging to that particular sector. So similarly, we have bond indices also, and then we have other classes of indices also. Yeah. So there is not one indices. There are multiple indices, and based on your risk appetite, you can choose which indices would you like to prefer, and you should go ahead with that.
I would
Thank
like
you,
to
Abhishek.
ask some question. Can I ask
Yes,
some
sir.
question? See, I think if you can throw some light on the failure of Vodafone, Yes Bank, and subsequently Franklin Templeton, and the role of SEBI, can we treat SEBI as a toothless tiger, or they will have any effective role to play in such massive failures?
Actually, SEBI is like a market watcher, like
Regulator.
yeah, regulator. So they work for the interest of the end investors, and they make rules and regulations such that the intermediaries do not take undue advantage because of the position they are occupying in this investment chain. So they are always working for the betterment of the investors, and they are coming up with circulars and guidelines which makes companies to comply with them, and it becomes difficult for them to commit fraud or in doing any such illegal activities, which few of the companies love to do multiple times. So coming to like you tell, like Yes Bank fiasco and those things. So those are like company specific things. Those are like, and that is the reason I advise people not to invest in company, because when you are investing in directly in individual stocks, you are carrying two level of risk. One is called market risk, which is pervasive across all the market, and there is something called unsystematic risk, which is specific to that company. And the good thing is that these unsystematic risks do not pay you any return. So people should not invest in like individual stocks, and they should not try to analyze them, because it is impossible, practically impossible. Even in the mutual fund companies, they have like security analysts, like 40, 50, 100 security analysts tracking every sector. So they have a team of 50 to 100 analysts, and they are able to do so. Not, but for an individual investor, it becomes very difficult. So yeah, that is what these are some of the key lessons that investors should learn. That if you invest in the companies like Yes Bank, or if you invest in a particular fund like Franklin Templeton and all, then you're prone to their risk. When you're investing in the index, you're only exposing yourself to the market. You're not exposing to the company management. You're not exposing to your sector. You're not exposing to the particular company. You are exposing yourself only to the overall market. And overall market is nothing but India Inc. I am exposing only myself towards the India Inc. If India Inc. is doing good, I will do good. If India Inc. is doing bad, then entire India is getting affected. But if you are investing in like particular companies, then you are taking too much risk, which is not always rewarded and which is not always advisable.
My question was only towards the debt funds, the failure of debt funds because of such failures. And SEBI being a spectator.
Debt fund in India is at a very nascent stage as compared to other developed economies, and probably like SEBI will come up with certain rules and guidelines which is more in line with those rules which are there in the developed economies, and which will make the market of the debt fund more liquid and more accessible to the common investors. So
why
right now,
ICICI Securities don't market index funds?
because they don't make money from them.
But SEBI can regulate it, and SEBI can force them to offer.
No. It is not that. SEBI will only ask them to that you provide such a product, but they cannot force them to tell you have to sell these products, because it is like capital market. Like it is a like capitalist economy.
But
so
if we demand also, they don't give this product.
Okay.
The point is, if we demand also, they don't give this product.
Then you can file a complaint. If you demand and they don't provide, then you can file a complaint. You can file with the regulator, or you can file with the zonal officer there. But the SEBI cannot put a stick on ICICI and tell like, yeah, you need to sell these products. They can't do it. But yeah, what they can do is that you should make these products available to the investor, and you should try to educate. But again, when you're trying to educate, the conflict of interest come, and they will in the name of educating investors, what they do is basically they sell their own product. They market their own products from which they make money. So actually, it is the responsibility of the end investors to educate themselves. They cannot rely on financing intermediaries to make them well off.
Okay,
Which is
so
the best AMC? Which is the best AMC you consider for index funds investing? AMC. AMC.
Yeah, this is something I cannot name it in public, but actually, if you're thinking of investing in index fund, look for the AMC which is charging you least fees. So they will disclose their fees in their prospectus and in their website. So look for them which is charging you least fees, because there was an academic research which done to find out which is the particular factor which affects the return of the fund in the future. So among all these star ratings, AUM and other key matrices, the only factor which determined the most future return was the expense. And it was the result of the study was the less you pay as an expense, the more you earn in your return. So when you're investing in index fund across from different AMCs, just compare which of them has the least fees and invest with them.
Anyway, we'll obtain your number from Madhup and then maybe disturb you.
So
Okay,
the final word here is that many people here don't know which are the index funds in the Indian market.
Yeah.
Many people are not even aware of what an index fund is. So as a corollary to what Omkar Gupta ji asked, I can understand your unwillingness to name the best AMC for index funds, but it would not be improper to at least name the top 3-4 index funds so that people know which funds are sort of active and worthwhile looking at. That's the last word.
Yeah. So actually, all the AMCs are giving avenues to invest in index fund. So basically, some of the major indices are like Sensex. You can invest in the Sensex index fund. You can invest in a Nifty 50 index fund, or you can invest in BSE 100. So my advice would be like to go with the Nifty 50 or BSE 100, because when you go with the Sensex index, so Sensex index fund only comprises of companies from the large cap, and they have a lesser growth opportunities. Large cap comprises of all the big companies which are like kind of matured and they have saturated and there's some kind of stability. So there's some lack of growth opportunities in those large cap stocks. But when you go to Nifty 50 or BSE 100, then you start getting exposure to mid cap companies also. And these mid cap companies have a better growth opportunities. And if you want to diversify like BSE 200 or BSE 500 also, then you will have a huge chunk of small cap companies in your portfolio also. So small cap are highly risky and their return from them varies a lot. It is in India actually the small cap have not done so on a so much better on a risk adjusted basis. So I would say like going with a BSE 100 would be the best thing, or Nifty 50 would be the best thing to go forward with.
Abhishek, last question from me.
Yes, sir.
Suppose there is a loss in my equity mutual fund portfolio of 30%.
Yes,
What
sir.
is the harm in booking the loss? And in any case, loss, I'll get the benefit in case I make profit in the future for balancing the profit, and direct that fund to index funds right away.
Yeah. So actually,
because
that
if
is
index
one.
fund grow, these funds would grow, then index fund will also grow. In any case.
So actually all these funds are like they are trying to track the index fund. Basically, index fund is the benchmark and they are trying to meet the benchmark or beat the benchmark. So yeah, you can do that. That is one possible solution. Like if you can book loss and you can claim tax benefit from that, and you can deploy those funds into the index fund. But yeah, so that is one possible thing you can look into it.
And another thing that you can consider is the mean aversion rule that Abhishek was talking about. So if they have sunk so much that you believe that these stocks are gonna anyway come back, so this is something that you have to evaluate. Let's say their return, you expect, okay, it's 30% down and I'm anyway gonna get back 30%, and market is only 10% down. So you can actually calculate, okay, this will make a comeback of 10%, but my stocks have a potential of 30%. This is a call that you have to see by evaluating your stocks. So
individual investors will not be able to do it.
So
Okay,
safe side is anyway.
I think we are sort of running out of time, although this is quite interesting, and I'm sure many people will have many more things to talk to you about on an individual basis.
Yeah.
But we need to sort of cut it here. And
Yes.
I can request all the people who want to get in touch with you personally to go ahead and do that. And your contact details can be shared with the
Yes, sir.
participants here. So
Yes, yes, sir. So,
maybe people can talk to you or write to you
yeah, definitely.
for individual
Yeah,
level.
we can circulate his email, and people can write out an email whenever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And circulate his number also. We can try to
yeah,
get him
that's
on
what I said.
WhatsApp. WhatsApp.
Yes,
what I-
yeah, yeah.
We will
So
not obviously disturb him on daily basis. There's no chance.
I would be more than
See,
happy to
I like this
talk
talk,
to you, sir.
Abhishek, only from one angle, that you have given a very honest opinion. You are not sort of connected with any AMC or whatever it is. So your views are pure views.
Yeah, yeah.
They are not selfish views in any manner.
True, true. So I'm not connected to any AMC. I'm not connected to any stockbroker, but I've done quite a lot of research to understand how they work. So
But you are
these are
some
my
way
personal.
connected with all of us.
Yes, sir, sure.
Being an
Abhishek is
alpha.
available. Abhishek is available on besides email and mobile. That is WhatsApp. He's also available on social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So there are various means of connecting with him, which people can choose the method that they want to use.
Where
Yeah,
are you
I
based,
think
Abhishek?
LinkedIn would be a better option, because the moment Abhishek sees this message from some ITVHU alumnus, there's a higher probability of getting an answer immediately.
Right.
Oh,
So
yeah, care for some oldies like us also, who are not very familiar with LinkedIn,
we have to
Facebook.
care for everybody.
True, true, sir. True, sir.
So I think it's time to sort of conclude. And
Yes.
I want to thank Abhishek that this was a great. It was great having you with us and knowing about your journey as an author. This session has been engaging and insightful, and I'm confident that the participants have picked up important aspects of managing their money and investments. I think the main takeaway here is that many myths and methods that people mostly follow have been shattered. I think there is some new learning for people who simply put their money into good-looking stocks. And now people should know that following the indices is better than following good companies.
True, true, sir.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go through each and every point that was made in this discussion, but I also want to inform everybody here that Abhishek's books are available on Amazon India and
Yeah.
are also proudly displayed in the bookshelf of authors from IIT BHU at the institute. So Abhishek, we are proud of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It was privilege talking to you and discussing my views with everyone. So I felt really privileged to be part of this meeting.
Yeah.
Great job, Abhishek.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you, the participants. Thank you, Pulkit and Naman, and all the participants who took out time on a Sunday evening to join us. And all the best to everyone. Thank you.
Happy
Thank you.
investing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
dear.
Thank you, everyone.